Alan, how are you?
Very happy to be with you, Leon.
Well, yeah, I'm super stoked to have your beautiful face on my screen. I've been looking forward to this for 6 or 7 months, eagerly awaiting this moment. So thank you so much.
God's timing is perfect.
And thank you for all of the beautiful work that you do. I just couldn't emphasize enough how much joy I get out of your work and how unique it is and beautiful light that you shine.
Thank you. That makes it complete for me. I love to give it and I love to hear that. So thanks so much.
We're done then, are we?
It could, it
Bye.
could be.
Thanks.
It's the moment of presence that's fulfilling. We could go on for hours, but those moments of presence are the things that really feed our soul.
So I made sure that I sent you a copy of the course a couple of weeks ago so you could familiarize yourself with this book.
Very good.
But 44 years with that book.
Yeah, I found it in 1980.
Amazing. How did it come into your life?
Um, I had heard about it through some various informal study groups. And actually, I was kind of skeptical because I thought it was like psychic hocus pocus, manifest holy ashen rings and stuff like that. And then there was an article about it in Psychology Today.
Wow.
And even the article was hokey because it showed a man walking on the street with three golden books falling to him from heaven. And I read it, and something said, just do this. It was not a rational decision. It was just a total Holy Spirit guidance. And $30 was a lot for me in those days. I was only paying $150 rent. And so it was an investment, but the voice just said, do it. And in those days, have you ever seen the hardcover copies that came in a box? Have you ever seen those? Yeah. So it came in a cardboard box with three books, hardcover. And I opened it up to the introduction, and it jumped out at me like it was like the Batman movies where they go pow. Well, it was like the introduction, and the voice said, "This is real. This is important. This is true. Just do this." And so I began. And simultaneously with my first year of doing the course, I was writing my first book. The dragon doesn't live here anymore. And so the course kind of worked its way into the book, which I think made the book wonderful. So it was all Holy Spirit. It was a God job. It was all Holy Spirit's guidance.
Wow. Whereabouts in the world were you back then?
I was living in New Jersey, outside of New York.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in the Psychology Today article, would that have been John Mundy's work or?
No, that was a long time ago. That was an independent article through Psychology Today. Just their magazine was covering the course for the first time.
Wow. Because I think,
Yeah.
the psychology, it kind of strikes me personally more with greater sort of strength and clarity as the years go by. I'm preparing for something myself at the moment, and I'm just thinking about all of these lessons where it might be like, I'm not a victim of the world I see. I've invented the world I see. I'm never upset for the reason I think. Nothing I see means anything. And there's so many lessons in the workbook which have no reference to anything spiritual. They're just purely psychological mind training. And
Yeah.
obviously, they go hand in hand with the beautiful lessons, such as my holiness envelops everything I see. My mind is part of God's. God being light is also love. However you want to recite those ones, but I think the psychology, certainly of late anyway, seems to really be tuning that dial in for me to just see how strong a presence it's got in the material.
The course is the ultimate psychology training. And, I was a psychology major in college. And it was mainly about rats, statistics, and crazy people. And there were no models for health and humanism and spirit. And I was, even though I got a degree, I graduated with the highest honors. It didn't teach me how to live,
Hmm.
And then when I went to graduate school, my professors were not healthy people spiritually or
Right.
psychologically. They needed psychology as much as they were teaching it.
Mm.
And in graduate school, I hooked up with a humanistic psychology program, which was way, way beyond what I learned in behaviorism, and which led me to my spiritual path,
Mm.
which led me to A Course in Miracles. And looking back, I see that the Course penetrates to the deepest levels of human psychology that very few psychologists have touched. And
Mm.
so if you really want to learn psychology, pick up A Course in Miracles. There's no higher psychology. And one more thing, if I may.
Yeah, please.
To Greece, my host said the word psyche is actually a Greek word pronounced psyche in Greek, and it means soul. But we think the word psyche means mind,
Mm.
but the word psyche really means soul from the ancient Greece. So true psychology plumbs to the depth of the soul. So, the Course in Miracles is the truest psychology.
Wow. And I know prior to us pressing record that I was saying to you about I see you, I see you and experience you as a translator of the course as well. We know it's incredibly cerebral and intellectual, and we've all read that same paragraph 311 times successively and still gone, what?
What?
But you have this beautiful way, as demonstrated by your book, which is nearly 10 years old as well, with everything people need to know about your leaning towards translating is in that title, of course, in Miracles Made Easy. um, I found myself wondering how clear that realization was for you, or recognition that you felt you were going to pen that book as such. Did it dawn on you? Did you almost look around and go, oh right, or was it growing? Or how did it come that you found yourself writing that book?
I met umpteen students of the course who had started it but didn't get very far.
Hmm.
And one lady told me that she purchased the book, she put it on a bookshelf, she picked it up at a later date, and she noticed that the receipt was still on the book from 10 years previous. And so this is a very common story, as you well know, that a lot of people pick up the course and they put it aside. They don't get it, salvation and atonement and time, revelation and miracles. And I really felt that there needed to be some kind of bridge between the esoteric nature of the course and daily practical living.
Hmm.
So I wanted to help people pick up the course before 10 years after purchasing it. I think Robert Holden, your compadre, said, "The Course in Miracles is the only book that's been purchased by millions, but read by just a few." And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So I thought if I could just help people digest the course and make it real and practical in their daily life without putting it aside and really embracing it instead of resisting it, that would be a nice contribution. So that's what I did. And fortunately, I get lots of responses to that effect.
So you would have already been ish 30 years into your relationship with the material anyway.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I'd been incorporating this course in all of my teachings, but as a secondary factor.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, for some reason, it just moved to the primary factor. So now most of my work is course based.
Hmm.
You know, it's timing is everything and guidance is everything.
Absolutely. Yes, I've made a note of miracles are merely the translation of denial into truth. For the on the vibe of the translator, I thought, well, there you go.
You know, there's a miracle available in everything. I mean, the Course says that it all depends on the vision you're using. There's fear vision and there's miracle vision. So I constantly have my antenna up to see metaphors and see wonderful things happening in the midst of death. I'll give you an example. So I've been writing up a storm lately, and I have like 4 or 5 books going at once. I love to do it. And I kind of went off on a tangent, like I got metaphysical indigestion. Because I was just doing too much in too many directions, and I was going down rabbit holes. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just do a little writing fast. And then yesterday, we have this wonderful holistic vet we take our dogs to. He's a world-class veterinarian. And as we were leaving, we see him every week. He said, don't write too much,
Wow.
which had nothing to do, he knows I'm a writer, but we've never had a conversation like that. It had nothing to do with the conversation. And so I really believe that Holy Spirit was channeling through him
Mm.
a confirmation for me that I need to take a bit of a break from writing. I'll pick it up
Mm.
again, of course. But
Mm.
where did that come from? You know, it was guidance that had nothing to do with anything that was happening. But it was Spirit used him. He's a good open guy. Spirit used him to give me a message. And I think those kind of miracles are available us through truck drivers and waitresses and lovers and pets. You know, it's like Spirit is always trying to reach us, but we have to be reachable.
Mm. Beautiful. It makes me think of the writing process as a musician as well.
Mm.
And certain times in my life when I've gone, oh, I haven't picked the guitar up for like a fortnight, or, God, I haven't written any lyrics for like a month. And, years ago, that would have made me think, oh no, have I lost my involvement and engagement with this? And then over time, I came to understand that every single day is part of the writing process because I'm gathering the experience and I might not realize it. And I tend to be the sort of person who things percolate and I'm ruminating on something and I'll be washing up at the kitchen sink and then the penny will drop with something. I don't have to sit there and close my eyes and kind of force or accept. So I began to ease up on myself over time and say, look, you're always in the writing process. I guarantee you in a month's time, you'll go, oh, there'll be some little phrase, there'll be some sound, and you'll
Yeah.
start writing, and it will be processing what you've experienced.
There's a beautiful story about Pablo Picasso.
Mm.
The story goes that back in the 1950s, there's a woman who was shopping in an open air market in Nice, France. And she saw a man who looked like Picasso, and he had a little sketch pad and a charcoal. She said, are you Picasso? He said, yes, I am. Oh my God, you are my idol. You're the greatest painter. I can't believe I'm actually meeting you in person. And she said, can I ask you for a huge favor? Could you possibly do a little sketch of me? And he looks her up and down. He says, well, all right. So they sit down at the sidewalk cafe and he takes his charcoal and he does a sketch of her like 15 minutes. She said, I'll pay you anything. Don't just do it. And he turns his sketch around. Oh my God, a Picasso. I mean, this is unbelievable. It's the greatest day of my life. How much do I owe you? And he said, well, that'll be $5,000, which would be like 50,000 today, right? He said, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. He said, I had no idea. I mean, I know I said I would pay you, but that seems like quite a lot for 15 minutes. He said, no, madam, you don't understand. He says, that painting took me 80 years and 15 minutes. In other words, every stitch of his life, every divorce, every health challenge, every heady high, every low, depression, everything that ever happened to him was enrolled in that particular portrait. So you and I are saying the same thing, that every moment leads up to your music writing and my prose writing. It's all connected. There's no moment of our life that is disconnected from where we stand at the moment.
Isn't that beautiful? I'm so glad you mentioned him as well, because I'll sometimes say to people, his deduction after 7, 8 decades of focusing on his beautiful skill, to do what he did. His conclusion from that journey was that he wanted to be able to paint again like he did as a small child,
Mm.
and to be absent from, and how relevant is that to us, certainly to what you and I were speaking about earlier, of like the course material. I don't know if transcending it's the right word, but reducing it down to just an application, you know. And when we're children and we're so close to source, and we haven't had that huge diversion into intellectualism and study and being programmed with the ways of the world, kids are just the greatest, aren't they? They're like animals. They've got it going on. And any adult who doesn't try and get back to that, in my books, I think Billy Connolly, amazing comedian from Scotland, one thing that he said, which I always loved, was he said, "I'd never trust anybody who was left alone in a room with a tea cozy and didn't try it on as a hat."
There you go.
And it's, that's the beautiful thing about children, and they're just pure knowing. And for Picasso to take that incredible journey and to say, "I wish I could paint like I did again when I was like 5 or something," it's like,
Right on. Yeah. I think
mighty.
Swami Satchidananda said, we started out fine and then we got defined. And now we're getting refined.
Wow.
Back to original innocence. I like that phrase, original innocence.
Wow. I love that. Beautiful. So I've got a few notes here. You talk about what you're passionate about. Your videos are based on the practical applications of course principles with a metaphor or an analogy that's simple. And then you then share about how you yourself have wondered about this metaphor and what it represents, and how you can apply this in order to better your understanding and give more of yourself and be more attuned to love. And like I said to you earlier, that's beautiful for me, for somebody who's had a 44-year journey with the course, to still hold their hands up and just have that kind of viewpoint to say beginner. I think that's so powerful, and it's so helpful. One of my really good friends is less than a year with the course, and he absolutely loves A Course in Miracles Made Easy. He was over the moon to know that you and I are talking today. He can't wait for the episode. And we have a small group where we're sharing stuff, and I do the same thing. I'll just say, look, we're all equal. It's not like we're on day one, but let's all meet each other as equals in the same place. And don't think for a minute that if you present something to the group from the perspective of someone who's less than a year into this material, that it won't be deeply profound and strike a chord with everybody else here. So I think, there's something really fantastic about this method that you have. I'm guessing from what I know that it's just who you are, really, rather than you sat down and went, "Oh, I know what I'm going to do."
It comes naturally. And I've had very good role models. I studied intimately with Ram Dass, who was a great storyteller,
I didn't
and
know
he
that.
was really humble and naked about his process. And he made people laugh, he made people cry, and I was really impressed by his authenticity.
Mm,
And so I try to use the stories of my life to pass along to support others.
mm. I love that guy.
He was a
Deeply
great
touched.
soul. He was a one-man transformation. Some people call him the father of New Age, and he certainly changed my life and millions of lives.
Mm, still does.
And I was able to. He moved to Maui, and I lived on Maui, and he moved to Maui for the last, I don't know, 15 years of his life.
Mm.
So I had the fortune to spend a lot of time with him. And once we co-presented a workshop, and I played, and he had a stroke, and
Yeah.
he was in a wheelchair for the last 20 years of his life, and he had a lot of physical issues as he aged, and so, but he always bore them with a smile. It was amazing. So once I presented a workshop with him, and I played devil's advocate. I was interviewing him, so I said, Ramdas, what would you say to someone who said that the world sucks and there's evil and death and suffering, and what am I doing here? So he looks at me, just smiles, he says, change your mind. That was his whole answer to suffering.
What a legend.
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on. Daily, I practice changing my mind. I have plenty of opportunities to change it. The ego wants to jump in and go booga booga, but no, I try to go and do rescue remedies. It's like, of course, miracle is a psychological rescue remedy.
Superb. And I know you were saying that you'd watched the episode with Carol
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and we're talking about authentic, and we're talking about transmitting an energy of just coming from the good place and the right place. There's a fantastic example, isn't it, to use Carol?
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely lady. She and John, I think they're one of the few people, two of the few people who knew Helen and Bill originally. And I have so much respect. I guess they're both in their 80s now.
Mm,
And they're just useful and vital in teaching and carrying the flag. And, I have a great deal of respect for both of them, John Mundy and Carol Howe. Yeah.
mm. But one thing that came to mind with Carol, and I've repeated it to a number of guests, is like Carol talking to us about essentially what we could call clairsentience, the fact that we all have this capacity to read energy. We know the truth, whether or not we can articulate that recognition or noticing, but we feel it. So when people are being authentic, we feel that, and therefore that softens something in the way that people lean in to go, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
Is this guy, what is this guy saying? And as I said to you, it's like I like to talk to people who don't realize that they are the Holy Son of God Himself, and they just think that they're in the world of form, and find ways to use Course in Miracles principles, like we said earlier, again with the psychology, and to just plant some seeds or to just offer them some thoughts that they can mull over in their own time to the extent that they want to, without there being any sense of like something's being imposed upon them with in terms of like a dogma or a religion or whatnot. So
Yeah.
I've had loads of great nuggets from your work. I'll tell you one of my favourite stories. It'd be nice if you could tell it. Is about the guy parking across the driveway of the guy who's his mum's. Oh, I feel like I'm going to give the whole story away. Does that come back to you?
Remind me details. I have a couple like that. Which one?
It's okay. With his mum going to hospital.
God bless me. I don't remember that. It was probably a long time ago.
Can I tell you one of your stories?
Please do. Yeah, please share. I have a lot of stories, so please clue me in with you.
I love this story, and I've told this to so many people. It's when you're talking about the love that's whenever there's something missing in a situation, it's always the love that we're not giving ourselves. And you tell this story about a guy who parks across the driveway of someone else's house, and he runs off to do whatever he needs to do. And then when he comes back to his car, there's a great big giant guy there, really angry and uptight. And he's like, "What are you doing parking in front of my driver? My mum's not well. I've got to take her to the hospital." And you know, quite an imposing force and figure. And this fella just goes, "Do you know what?" He goes, "You're right. I'm really, really sorry." He's like, "Can I come and help you get your mum and help you get in the car quicker so you can get to hospital because I've delayed you?" And this really tense, angry giant of a man just dropped his shoulders and became like a giant big baby and
No.
burst into tears and put his arms around this other guy and said, "Oh, brother, that would be so helpful. I'm really
Mhm,
stressed
mhm.
out." And and I use that a lot with people that I talk to and give them that example to say, you know, the love that was missing in the situation was the love he
Yeah.
wasn't giving.
It's either a pure expression of love or a call for love. And I my mind drops into judgments occasionally, more than I care to admit.
You're not
And
human, are you, by any
was
chance?
that, yeah, yeah, plenty, plenty. And I was at thank you for reminding me of that story. It is a great story.
Mm,
So, I live on Kauai, Hawaii, and I was sitting in a beach park, and there's a little restaurant across the way, and there's some tourists there, and they were sitting on this picnic table. They were sitting on the table where people eat, and they were spraying all kinds of like smelly, toxic sunscreen, which kills the reefs, you know. And they were talking loudly and smoking, and I just had a lot of judgments about them. I
mm.
thought, damn tourists coming ruining the island, and the voice said, "Well, is there another way to look at this?" And I said, "Well, maybe they came to this beautiful place for healing.
Mm,
Maybe they're city folks, and maybe they will see the Nepali coast and swim and see turtles and bask on the beautiful white sand beach. And maybe they need to come here to soften and open their hearts and be blessed by the place." So I had to shift from their cursing my island to my island might be blessing them.
mm,
And so to me, Leon, it's just these little, it's just a little moment of life,
mm,
nothing dramatic, but I had to choose and I had to reinterpret what I believed was an intrusion, an invasion,
mm.
and reinterpret that as a call for love. And that's what I get to do all day long. We all do, if we're willing, if
Yeah.
we're willing.
And that ties in perfectly with what I'm saying about what's so lovely about you and your gifts is that, you know, you're authentic about it, you're honest about it, you share the ups and the downs, you come up with an answer, and all of that really, you know, gives what you put on the table so much more sparkle because
Mm.
what's the opposite to that? The opposite is for somebody to pretend that they're floating 2 inches above the ground all the time and they haven't had
Yeah.
anything other than pure bliss in their life since they experienced whatever it was that got them
Yeah.
on their journey to waking up.
Yeah, I'm really wary of perfect people. I think, and I've coached, I've coached thousands of people, and I teach coaching. And when you really sit down with people and they talk about the intimate details of their life,
Mm,
everybody has something going on.
mm,
And when we're honest about it, we show up. And So we're all here for a reason. I think if you were really 2 inches off the ground, you would float off into the ethers. I mean, if you really had nothing to do on Earth, you wouldn't be here. And so I think, as the Course says in the introduction, you're not here to just float off into the ethers. You're here to discover the blocks to the awareness of love's presence and erase them where you can, and reveal what was hidden by fear.
Mm. Yeah, I think a thing that's been in my psyche recently is just contemplating the man Jesus, prior
Mm.
to prior to whatever the powers that be and that were decided to distort this potential symbol for the accessibility of this mindset. It's I was talking to someone the other day and sort of joking with him, saying, imagine they were sitting around going, right, what can we do about this guy? And one of them goes, hey, why don't we say that his mum woke up one morning and she was pregnant? It's like, oh, brilliant. Then no one will be able to meet him and match that, right? Yeah, that's a good. Someone else goes, hey, what about he walked on water? Yeah, he walked. Oh, write that one down. He moved a mountain, and just like, let's create this huge gulf between what this man achieved and what
Yeah.
people can achieve and access. Let's turn him into a symbol that isn't achievable or attainable, and then let's like cover the globe in pictures of him nailed to a cross with the crown of thorns on, looking completely broken. It's like, what did he do? He went down on the streets and he hung out with the lepers and the beggars and the prostitutes and the regular, ordinary people, because he was an ordinary guy. We know there's every chance that if he was in like the Essenes community or whatnot, he would have been recognized in a similar fashion to the Dalai Lama, to a sense, where all the elders would have gone, oh, hold on a minute, that guy's got something on that kid, you know, teach him, fill him up. And back then, all of those ancient spiritual traditions had existed for thousands of years, so he was very lightly schooled on all of that stuff, had a really switched on mind, realized that the face of Christ behind all of the differences, and initiated the atonement process, as it would be called to us in the Course, where he became the perfect manifestation of the Holy Spirit. But he didn't go to hang out with professors, and he didn't go to the temples and hang out with the high priests. He went and hung out with the ordinary people, spoke
Yeah.
to them from the heart, and said, love each other like your brothers and sisters. It's like, what a dangerous message that is.
Someone said, when you speak from your heart, everyone listens because God is talking. And so you're absolutely correct, Leon. He had the capacity to speak to people at the heart level and reach them where the intellectuals were not reachable.
Mm,
And there's a wonderful parable he taught about a wealthy man who was giving a feast for the city, and his servants went out and invited all these important people, and they were all too busy minding their bank accounts and tilling the fields and getting married. So forget about them. Invite all the poor people and the beggars and the hungry. They'll come.
mm,
And they were all hungry for truth. They were hungry for They weren't distracted.
mm,
And so the Course, one thing I love about the Jesus of the Course is that he defines himself not as an icon to be worshipped,
mm,
but as our elder brother who
mm,
has simply walked the path we're all walking, and he got to the end of the road before we have, and he's showing us the way.
mm.
And he doesn't want our worship, he wants our worthship. And so I can relate to that guy. I don't want to worship somebody. I want somebody who I can become like if I do my homework. And it's happening slowly.
Mhm.
So,
And
and
he was a translator.
I I just wrote a book. It's a novel. It's called Baby It's You.
Oh yeah.
And it's about there's 5 stories. And one of the stories is about a young man who has a mission to take Jesus off the cross. And he goes around to all the churches he can find, and he removes the crucifix. And he gets in a lot of trouble for it. I won't go into what happens, but his mission is to why do you kneel before an ancient torture device? And why, this man had a ministry of 3 years where he healed thousands of people and raised the dead. And, why do we remember him by the final hours of his life when he was crucified? Why not have statues of him, which the Catholics do, of the open-armed welcoming Jesus instead of the dead, emaciated, glorified Jesus? He should be glorified, not glorified. I think someone commented on Mel Gibson's, what was his movie, the Passion of Christ? I forget the,
Yeah.
and the reviewer called it "Gory, Gory, Hallelujah." That was the reviewer's title. I said, come on, guys, there's so much more to him than the guy who got killed. So let's remember him in life, not in death. He rose from the cross. Oh yeah, people are so, it's like little narrow-minded mind, but it's okay. We're opening.
Yeah, well, I think my favorite ever comedian, Bill Hicks, said, if Jesus comes back, do you think he's ever going to want to see a cross again?
Yeah. And he said in the Course in Miracles, that was the last useless journey. And I have a friend, it's kind of a bit of a dark humor, but you'll appreciate it. He said that if Jesus were executed today, we would be walking around for the next 2,000 years with little gold electric chairs hanging from chains around our neck. And it's sad, but it's true. Come on, guys.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful. I'll tell you one thing that's coming to mind is I might have to put the light on here. The sun's going down. Where are we? There we go. Ooh.
Nice.
Let me look at this. There's something, and again, this is one of yours that I use a lot. I'd never make it my goal to try and manage someone else's behavior. That's just so good. Brilliant.
I had a coaching client who had just gotten out of the hospital for being treated for extremely high and dangerous high blood pressure. And finally they sent her home with some medication. And she said, I'm not really getting any better. And I asked her, the best question I could, what extreme pressure do you feel in your life? Or what extreme pressure related to blood pressure are you putting on anybody? She said, well, I've been trying to change my husband for 42 years. And I said, well, madam, have you succeeded? No, I haven't. I said, do you believe that you will succeed any more in the next 42 years? And she said, no, I'm starting to get that.
She was a slow learner.
There's a couple morals to the story. Like, one is that when your body is always giving you a message about what's going on in your spirit. And if you're extremely pressuring somebody, you're going to feel extremely pressured yourself. And it's going to show up in blood pressure or something like that. And the second, as you alluded to, Leon, was that to attempt to change anybody else is completely fruitless and useless. And there's a famous line from the Course, quit trying to change the world and instead change your mind about the world. That's the Course in Miracles in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Treasured wounds, Alan, another one of your beautiful gems. What does that make you think of from your work?
Yeah, the Course goes into a lot of detail talk about psychology. It says that all illness is an attack on the self to make someone else guilty.
Mm.
And this is a big pill for people to swallow because it really confronts our willingness to make other people wrong and have us suffer as a result.
Mm.
And it requires the ultimate honesty to say, um, I, I was coaching another woman who years ago, she'd been married for a long time, and she woke up one morning and she was paralyzed, literally paralyzed. She could not get out of bed. And she's one of my students. I called her afterwards, and she had gotten up eventually. And I asked her, "How in your life do you feel paralyzed?" She said, "Well, my husband is a very controlling and jealous man,
Mm.
and I'm now just beginning a new business venture with a man." I said, "I'm not interested in him as a man, but he's a
Mm.
business partner.
Mm.
And my husband just really gave me hell for attempting to build a business with a man. That's not him." So there was a direct correlation between her feeling paralyzed in her marriage and her developing a physical paralysis. And of course, the answer was for she had to somehow work out her relationship with her husband. And she left him, at least temporarily, or separated. That's not always the answer, obviously,
Mm.
but she had to somehow come to terms with a sense of feeling paralyzed, and because that was an attack on herself to make someone else guilty, namely her husband. So the course is so practical. It's just, I mean, it's physical. We can apply it to our physical material life. It's an esoteric, out there spiritual teaching, but it's 100% applicable to the events of our daily life.
Mhm.
Treasured wounds, great example.
Mhm. Fantastic. When you remove all thoughts of lack, all that remains is abundance. Do we need to elaborate on that?
Yeah, another EGO equals GAP.
Okay.
In other words, the ego's entire thought system is based on the belief that there's something missing.
Right.
And that if I could just get that person to be my partner, I would be happy. If I could just move to this place in time, it creates gaps in space and time.
Mm.
So when I graduate or when I mature, then I'll be enough. And so I've been spending a lot of time lately shining the light on the idea of gap
Mm.
and experimenting with the idea that every gap is an illusion
Mm.
and there's really fullness where the gap seems to be. And if I can claim the fullness instead of inventing a gap that I need to fill, then something really shifts and I come back to natural wholeness. Our natural state is whole. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing missing. I heard one course teacher say, "I have no needs." And so any need is an illusion. I know we believe we have needs,
Mm.
but what if you didn't need anything? What if today was perfect? What if I was enough? What if you're enough? What if, you know, I wrote one book called Enough. I wrote a whole book on this thing called Enough Already. I was having dinner with Dwayne Dyer one night, and he said, "I have enough money."
Mhm.
And I've never heard anybody say, "I have enough money." I've
Wow.
never heard anybody say that. Even the wealthiest people are still striving for more money. And I realized that's why Wayne was such a great teacher, because he claimed enoughness right where he stood.
Mm.
Like he wasn't waiting for more money or fame to become enough. Like, I mean, what if we all said, "I have enough money"? I mean, that would be an interesting twist, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I found myself in the last few days. There's something taking shape, it's a metaphor. I wonder if it's because I've spent the run up to today engaging in your material, and like I said, with your metaphors and analogy. So a lot of these are the elements I've got so far. There's God's had a word with Willy Wonka, and he's got an everlasting buffet. We go up to the buffet as the decision maker. We've got the Holy Spirit and the ego coming with us. The Holy Spirit's got a plate full of food. The ego's got a plate full of food, and the buffet table is covered in food. From a Holy Spirit perspective, it's like, right, who can I take this plate of food to and give it to them?
Mhm.
From an ego perspective, the ego's right. I'm going to have some of the Holy Spirit's food. I'm going to take some more
That's
food off the
true. That's
buffet.
true. Yeah.
And something as simple as that, in terms of the two camps between that complete, like the course says, a complete 180-degree shift around for how the world seems to be set up to what reality really is, to wake up on a new day and say, right, what can I give, not what can I get.
Yeah. The ego is the getting mechanism,
Mm.
and the Holy Spirit is the sharing and overflow mechanism. One of my favorite creative people is Richard Curtis, your countryman, who
Mm.
created Four Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill and Love Actually, lots of great films. And he spends half of his time on philanthropy. He's a very wealthy man, obviously, deserves it.
Mm.
And he's just happy to give love away through money,
Mm.
So I think we can all be spiritual philanthropists, no matter how much money we have.
Mm.
It's like we all have so much that we can overflow if we choose. My cup runneth over.
Mm.
And we're all in that position, but we don't realize that we're busy looking at what's missing.
Do you know what's interesting as well about that is the actual chemical payoff of I guess it might be dopamine, whatever the right chemical is to describe. That chemical payoff goes back to our time, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago as tribes people. So if you and I were the hunters that day, and we managed to successfully kill and capture and bring back an animal, when we share that with our tribe and we sit there and we eat our bit and they eat their bit, our brain gives us a reward, a payoff
Mm.
from all that time ago, sharing and the unity of seeing the equality being distributed and everybody winning together, kind of thing.
You know, it's true. Um, Dee and I were in the beach park the other night, and there was this lovely homeless lady in a car. She had a little cat, a pet cat in her car with her. And we conversed with her for a little while, and she did not look well, and
Mm.
her skin was not, I felt she was just lovely, a being of light. She wasn't mentally ill, she wasn't depressed, she was just like, so we drove away, and I said to Dee, shall we give her some cash? And so we said, yes. So we went back, and I just said, can I give you a donation? And first she said no, but then she said, okay. And as we drove away, I felt so fulfilled.
Mm.
Like, I like it when I get money. I'm happy to receive checks, but to just, get her some food and make her life better, help her cat, get her some gasoline, some petrol. It was like, there was such a deep sense of fulfillment that, it went deeper than the reward of receiving money. It was just a different kind of reward. And there was a guy back in COVID in Australia. He saw a bunch of people standing in line waiting for public assistance. And he said, I went to the bank and I took out $10,000 and I gave everybody in line $100 bill. And he said that was the best money I ever spent, the best investment in happiness I've ever made. So you don't have to give away money, but you can give away generosity. I know people who are generous with compliments. You
Mm,
know, they don't have money, but they're kind and they're supportive and they're validating and affirmative. There's so many different kinds of generosity besides money.
mm. It makes me think of to give and receive are one in truth, and then to think of truth as being a synonym for God, and it's like to give and receive are one in God. It's
Yeah.
there's no difference, is there? It's beautiful. If somebody's generous to you in a way that completely takes you off guard with just how beautiful it was, that's just as gorgeous as giving of yourself, as you said, in whatever the context might be. It doesn't have to be a physical item or piece of paper with someone's face on it. That can be turned into whatever's necessary.
Tony Robbins tells, this is before he was Tony Robbins, and he was living in Los Angeles, and he was down out, not down out, but didn't have a lot of money, and he had loaned $1,000 to a guy that was not repaying him, and he was kind of bust the guy. We couldn't get the guy to pay him, and I think Tony said he was down to just a few dollars in his pocket, like $30. I don't know what it was. And he went to this buffet. You were speaking about a buffet. There's this 8-year-old boy with his mother. And the boy was so kind and generous, and he held the chair for his mother. And Tony Robbins took all the cash in his pocket and he gave this to the little boy. And he said, it was last cash. And he
Mm.
said, buy your mother something nice, buy yourself something nice. And he said, in that moment, when I had nothing in my pocket, but I had given it all away, I became the most abundant, the most feeling of abundance I've ever had. He said, in that moment, I knew that I lived in a prosperous universe. And he said, when I got home, the guy who had owed me the money I found a check plus interest.
I can see why you've remembered that story.
Yeah. And now he's a multi-millionaire. But that's not the point.
No, yeah.
The point is that he tapped into the fact that we live in an abundant, generous, prosperous, overflowing universe, and we can be a part of it if we choose.
Or as you said, as I repeated earlier, when you remove all thoughts of lack, all that remains is abundance. Another one of yours that I really love. I've got so many here. I hope you haven't got any plans for the next couple of days. You have to tell Dee to slip you a sandwich under the camera in about 3 or 4 hours' time. So teach nobody that he is what you would not is who you would not want to be. Teach nobody that he is who you would not want to be. I just think that's beautiful. I mean, obviously, it radiates course rationale. I can see how the translator, Mr. Cohen, has interpreted that. But teach nobody that he is who you would not want to be. How lovely is that?
That's pretty much direct from the course. And we're always teaching by the vision we're holding of somebody else. It has nothing to do with the words, really. That's the least part of it.
Mm.
And I do a holistic life coach training, and I teach my coaches that your greatest gift to your clients is the vision you're holding of them. And so they walk in, they say, I'm ADHD, or I have a cancer diagnosis, or I'm a victim of infidelity. And I say, if you go into that self-definition with them, then you're contributing, you're compounding their victimhood.
Mm.
But if even while they're holding their picture of themselves as a diseased person or a victimized person, if you remember that they're a whole divine being that could never lose by any diagnosis or any infidelity, that they're far bigger than anything that's ever happened to them, and you remember their greatness, that is your hugest contribution to healing them. They will walk out feeling whole and empowered, and they will leave their limiting self-definition behind.
Mm.
And that's our gift. Our gift is the vision that we hold of each other. I can see it was groveling or stupid or old or sick but what if may I tell you one good story, Leon, among others?
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, many years, this is in my, I have a new book that's out now called Of Course in Miracles.
Wow. Okay.
Of Course in Miracles. That's the name of the book. When Love Becomes a Way of Life.
Mm.
So I opened the book with a story about many years ago, I volunteered to teach yoga in a veterans hospital.
Oh, I love the story. Yeah, go.
You know the story?
Please,
Yeah.
more. I'll hear it 100 times. Yeah.
And I walked in, I had no idea what I was getting into. There were all these people were all old and decrepit and in wheelchairs with no legs. And it was just a horrible scene. The diapers smelled. And I thought, what am I doing here?
Mm.
And the third time I was supposed to teach, I literally forgot to go. I was so depressed. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to find some way to make this work. So I decided that instead of seeing these people as sick, frail, decrepit, old, and dying, I would I would see their souls. I would treat them as divine beings.
Mm.
And so after teaching yoga, I gave them a meditation. I said, see yourself as 19 years old running on the beach. And this voice in my head said, you are so cruel, man, because these people, they can't even get out of their wheelchair. And you're reminding them that they can't do that.
Yeah.
But by the end of the meditation, tears were streaming down their cheeks and they were smiling. And I was seeing them with their highest potential.
Mm.
And that class became so popular that wheelchairs were lined up down the hallway waiting to get in when I came to teach. And I think of that scene at the end of Field of Dreams where all the cars are lined up to come to see the baseball field. And I was one of the few people in that hospital that did not see them as a victim of their illness. And they loved me, they loved my class. That class became like a temple because when they walked into that room, they became whole beings instead of frail, broken bodies. And I taught that class for 7 years.
Wow.
I developed incredible relationships with those people. And then when I left, one of my yoga students took over. I moved away. But to me, Leon, that's one of the most dramatic examples of how the vision we hold of each other
Mm.
is translated into manifestation. And that our primary purpose in life is to see each other as divine beings. And that's our gift to the universe. Nothing else is going to really cut it, really. We give money if we want, that's fine. But the vision is the gift we give. And of course, I received healing through giving that vision.
That reminds me of what we were saying about Jesus the man as well. He saw people like that when he did walk amongst the beggars and the
Yeah,
lame and the prostitutes. He didn't look at someone and see that. He looked and saw the divine perfection of their true reality behind the facade of how they appeared.
that was his gift.
And also, is it Willie that you took from the hospital to your?
You know that story, huh?
Of course, yeah. I'm all up to date on my Alan Cohen
Wow.
stories.
There
I'll
was
be
this,
writing a book on you.
yeah. Well, it's actually, thank you for reminding me about him. There's this one beautiful black man named Willie with little round wire eyeglasses, and he was a quadriplegic.
Mm.
And he was like a light bulb. He was so positive and always having a great day. How you doing, Alan? Oh, it's a beautiful day. and this guy couldn't even feed himself, right?
Incredible.
And he was just like a saint
Mm.
in the midst of a dark place. And I just fell in love with the guy, of course. And then when I launched my first book, I had a party at my home, and I arranged for him to have an ambulance take him from the hospital to my home for this party. And he was thrilled to get out, of course. And we all prayed over my book, including Willie, and the book became a bestseller. But just to get him out of the hospital and nurture him and honor him for being a light bulb in the darkness. Oh, what a guy. What a guy. I'm sure he's not around anymore, but he's one of my role models as somebody who he chose well-being in spite of his physical infirmities. God bless that guy.
Mm. When we think of like the Course saying the scripture's written, somebody like that, you can imagine that that's part and parcel of what they wanted to manifest and go beyond and demonstrate. Going,
Yeah.
give me that condition, or I'll take that out. I don't know how it works, but I'll have that condition, and then I will not be defined by it.
Yeah. God bless people like that. They're true healers. They're
Yeah.
healing our minds and our psyche.
And even someone who would call themselves an atheist, like say Stephen Hawking, think of what he achieved, the consequence, regardless of the consequence of what happened to him physically.
Yeah. We have these role models, God bless them.
Yeah. So that's nice because that makes me think of something that you said in my book of Alan. Shall I start the book of Alan, the life of Alan? Monty Python have already done the life of Brian. All beliefs are self-reinforcing.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, the ego has an airtight belief system,
Mm-hmm.
and the Holy Spirit has an airtight belief system. And of course, there's no overlap.
Mm.
And you can talk yourself into anything and prove it by people who agree with you. So this is one of the best reasons to not hang out with foul-minded people unless you're going to heal them. That's another purpose to do it. But it's very easy, during COVID, a lot of people went into deep, deep fear and resistance.
Mm.
And there was a lot of agreement about what victims we are.
Mm.
And I knew some people who chose to use that as an opportunity to give love and healing. What I did was I did what I call a daily dose of sanity. I started my YouTube channel
Mm.
and I did a 15-minute inspirational talk every day for a couple of months at the height of the lockdown.
Mm.
And that was my way of upholding people who want to stay in high vibration when there's a low vibration going on around us. So,
Mm.
you could sit and watch the news all day long and get more and more depressed, or you could read A Course in Miracles and get more and more elevated. And each belief system has plenty of proof that it is real
Mm.
when you're in it.
Mm.
But step out of it, Jesus said, in my Father's mansion, there are many rooms. There's a rooms of people who are affirming darkness, and there's a people who are of rooms. There's a room of people who are affirming healing, and whichever room you step into, you will find lots of proof that that's reality.
Makes me think of the bit in the Course where it sort of says, as you look out, so shall you see in, and your
Yeah,
perception will reflect the guidance that you've chosen.
yeah. Two men looked out through prison bars. One saw mud, the other stars. I've been James Allen. I forget who said that originally. A great metaphysical teacher. So we're all in prison. We all perceive that we're living in a body.
Yeah.
We all perceive that we have a life and a death. We all perceive that our wealth depends on the economy. It's a whole world of imprisoning beliefs.
Mm.
And the question is, are you willing to see out the prison bars and look at mud or look at stars? It's daily, we're just choosing which vision we'll use.
That's interesting. That makes me think of three things. I'm thinking of the course, there must be another way. Then
Mhm.
I'm thinking of something that came to mind earlier when you were talking, where you hear the phrase like, the pleasures of the world keep you asleep.
Mm.
And then I was thinking about a spiritual teacher who basically said, in his observation, 90% of his students come to the system from suffering, and only 10% as like a point of interest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I used to do a lot of work with unity churches. Do they have unity in England?
I've
Yeah.
heard John talk about them.
Yeah, it's a nice, it's new thought. It's spiritual, it's uplifting, it's metaphysical. And I used to say nobody comes to unity first. Like they had to go through Catholicism or have child sexual abuse or be an alcoholic, or they had to bump their head up against what doesn't work in the world.
Mm,
And then they raise their hand and say, there must be a better way.
mm,
Like, I can't believe I was supposed to live like this.
mm,
And then they find A Course in Miracles, Unity or Science of Mind, a lot of good stuff.
mm,
But when you've had your share of suffering, you start to ask, could there really be an answer that can get me out of this? Or they find their way to 12-step programs.
mm.
I had a woman who was in my class. She stood up for a workshop and she said, by age 18, I had not grown breasts.
Right.
So I had implants.
Oh, wow.
And she said, over 30 years, I had problems with them and I had 2 or 3 surgeries to correct. She said, the last time I literally died on the operating table
Wow.
and I was resuscitated. And she said, that's it. I'm not playing this game anymore. So she says, I had them removed. And she said, I'm standing before you in public today for the first day in 30 years without artificial breasts.
Right.
And she got a huge round of applause. And then the next day, this man of the group wrote her an extraordinary love poem.
Mm,
And she had to bump her head against the wall, so to speak, for 30 years before she decided nothing wrong with, people want to get artificial breasts, that's fine.
sure. Yeah.
But sometimes you have to have your share of suffering before you ask for a higher way. And the good news is that when you really ask sincerely,
Mm,
then Spirit will send you to the Course in Miracles or yoga or guru or something like that. That God answers all sincere requests for healing.
mm,
That's absolute. I have no doubt in my mind about that, Leanne, that anytime I sincerely ask for healing, it has come. And that's true for anybody. I'm not special. Everybody can get the healing if they ask sincerely.
mm.
What God would turn down a request like that? How mean would you have to be to not answer that prayer? And of course, God is not mean in the least. God is love.
How busy would he have to be?
Yeah.
How full is God's diary? What's he doing up there in perfect oneness?
And A Course in Miracles is a bridge from perfect oneness to diluted two-ness. And Jesus, it's an act of compassion. And Jesus could have sat by the right hand of God in all his glory and said, let this poor sucker suffer and figure it out. But instead, he said, well, I think I'll give him A Course in Miracles. Maybe it'll help them out of the muck.
That doesn't sound like him at all, does it? He must have had a bang on the head that day. Fantastic. So, change is an energy not to be feared, it's a wave to be surfed on.
Course in Miracles says that all change is helpful. I think it's a teacher's manual that says that it takes great spiritual maturity to recognize that all change is helpful.
Hmm.
So we have to take every minus and turn it into a plus with a stroke of vertical awareness.
Wow. Brilliant.
That's the game.
Brilliant. I love that. Wow. Do you remember this? I don't know if I don't think this is one of yours, but this is something that you've said which is really stuck with me. God is a flower who created a nose so that he could experience the fragrance of himself.
Yeah, I heard that from somebody. I forget who I. God is a flower that grew a nose to smell itself, something like that. Yeah.
I love that.
So
So
that's
yeah.
the highest use of duality. If we're in duality,
Hmm.
if we're experiencing duality, then our best use of it is to use our physical and psychic senses to discover unity, to discover our divine source.
Love that. The critical voice is not my own. Now, I think that's absolutely brilliant. If I think back to similar experience that you were describing to me earlier of opening the course for the first time as a young man and being struck by the introduction, one of the most liberating things for me is like a 20-year-old guy who had quite a lot of stuff to recover from in childhood. One of the things I could never reconcile was the fact that there was like a knowing and I could speak from that place of knowing and I could give counsel and I could give advice. And then I couldn't stay on that good foot constantly. And there would be like, whether it be a temper tantrum or the back end of the teenage mindset of like, it's not fair or whatever it would be. But because of that vacillating between those 2 points, then the ego would be able to go, see, listen to you trying to tell Alan something helpful because he's in this situation. And now look, you can't keep yourself together because now you're annoyed about something that's quite trivial, you know. And then when I felt what's in the course as a 20-year-old, when I felt that, you know, for me it was the introduction. It was that part. What's all encompassing can have no opposite. It was absolutely massive because I'd been looking through spiritual systems and I kept getting turned off every time they said it's our way or you don't get in. Anybody else isn't following us on our path, they're not getting in. It's just us, you know. And South Park was like the cartoon. They often make the most fantastic social commentary, and they did an episode once of what's that event that a certain religion wait. I think it begins with the letter R. It's like the end of the world, and they're waiting for that.
Like the tribulation.
Beg your pardon?
The tribulation.
I can't think. I want to say repent. It's quite a short word like that. It's like their sense that the Armageddon and the world's over. So South Park do this episode. They've got a few different groups of people's different religions. The world ends, and all these different people wake up in hell. All these groups, and they're looking at each other like that, and they're basically going, "Oh shit, it wasn't us. You weren't right. Who got it right?" And they're trying to look around at all these different groups until someone realizes that there's no Mormons down there with them in hell, and they go, "Oh no, it was the Mormons. You know, I should have been a Mormon." They were the only ones who got into heaven, you know. And
Well, that's what the Mormons would like to think.
so when I read that as a 20-year-old, you know, what's all encompassing can have no opposite. That was like, oh my God, there it is. You know, no one's left out, no one's excluded, no race, no gender, no creed, no nothing. It's like all of that, everybody's in. And that was one of the things that allowed my mind to engage and accept the material. And then, obviously, one of the first kind of real gifts for me was creating this demarcation between my true identity and this ego voice, and showing me that there was a separation, excuse the pun, between me and that mode of thought. So when that's still, when I'm writing this down last night in preparation to talk to you today, the critical voice is not my own. 31 years later, I know that the feeling of what you've said there from that experience.
Well, thank you for sharing about your own life, Leon. I mean, it touches me to see where you came from and how you were inspired by the course. And
Mm,
I mean, your early experiences led you to be hungry for healing and truth.
yeah.
And when you found the course, it touched you at the deepest place, and you were ripe and ready for it. So it's a beautiful thing. And the truth is that no child is born with a critical voice. I mean, we love to be around babies and pets because they're still connected to their original innocence.
Mm.
And of course, there's that wonderful song from South Pacific. You have to be taught by the time you're 6 or 7 or 8, but to hate all the people your relatives hate. You you have to be carefully taught. That's the title of the song. And we're taught even before 6 or 7 or 8. So uh, it's about getting back to who we were before we were taught who we're not. And so this is really important, that we need to develop some distance from the critical voice,
Mm,
because we need to disown it.
mm,
Because your father did this, your mother did that, and they told you why. Tell girls, why couldn't you have been a boy? And why don't you get the grades your older sister gets? And you better
mm,
go into the family business, otherwise you'll embarrass us.
mhm,
And we were bombarded with these thoughts until we thought they're our own thoughts.
mm,
And the parent dies or moves away or whatever, but now the parent is still bombarding you from your own. You basically synchronize your thoughts with theirs.
mm,
A friend of mine said it's impossible to defeat an enemy who has an outpost in your head. So the father may be dead for 20 years, but he's still banging at you from your own psyche. So the trick is to recognize that this is not my thought
mm,
and disown it and say, I absorbed the thought.
mm.
What would my true thought be if I were choosing an honest thought? And, the Course tells us in many ways that my mind holds only what I think with God, and only the thoughts I think with God are true. And so we have to begin to release the ego thoughts as if they belong to us. They don't. They're liars. In fundamentalism, they call Satan the liar. It's a good definition,
Mm.
because all these lie thoughts are berising us. And the only way to heal them is to counter them with truth thoughts, which is why we have 365 lessons in the Course, and to give us a new truth thought every day to counteract the effects of the lie thoughts.
Wow, I'll tell you what come to mind then as well is like part of my healing was writing this concept album, writing a double album with my band, because I was writing about my own life story, but what I did was I tweaked it so that it had more of a universal theme.
Mhm.
But it was obviously informed by my decision, and kind of like we were talking earlier, life and living is you gathering the harvest ready to turn it into something that you can feed yourself and others with.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I called that, or have called it, because obviously it exists, is back above the clouds. And obviously that symbology is to represent returning to a very high vibration closer to the source of light. And also a massive aspect of it is to use the symbols of a man and a boy, but to come at it from the Wordsworth kind of aspect, where he would say the child is the father of the man. So the first part of the story, disc one in the double album, is called The Man Remembers the Boy.
Mm.
And then there's an energetic shift towards that, the end of that first disc. And then the second disc is called The Boy Rescues the Man.
Cool. I love it.
So it
Beautiful.
made me think of
Beautiful.
what you were saying, you know, closer to the, and I had these really beautiful infographics made of like the arrow of time, and showing like a child and a man and an elderly person, and trying to visually explain to people that close to source was when you were undistorted, you hadn't been influenced by everything
Mm.
that was going to change your trajectory and knock you off track. And you know, it's very much uses flight as like the ultimate form of imagination, because there's something that I've got here where you said imagination is ultimately the most valuable contribution.
Mm.
And you know, that's a massive part of the symbolism that I use in the record, is like, if you're going to imagine, and I'll say to people, if a kid's going to imagine flying above the ground and they're running around with their arms outstretched, they're not going to think, well, I better just fly above the ground, like, you know, 10, 15 feet in case something bad happens and I crash. And, you know, they're going to fly up near the stratosphere and above the clouds and see the whole world in its glory, because I wanted to use that as like
Mm.
an example of unlimited imagination. And
Love it.
yeah, to
I love your album. I love the whole idea. Send me that graphic, which I love to see that
yeah, of
graphic that you
course.
made. Do you have a title for the album yet?
Yeah, so the album's called Back Above the Clouds.
Back Above the Clouds. Great.
Yeah, and the group is called Warm Rain, which is one
All right.
word. So warm rain is like my idea of nature's baptism. So
I
you're
see.
you're mixing standing in the warmth of the sun whilst being rained on. It's like bingo. So yes, and then the website is where all the infographics are. So that's warmrainband.com. But I'll send you all of those. And I
I'd
don't know
love
if
to
you,
see it. Love to see
yeah,
it. Sounds great.
if you're a digital music user, then it's on all the different platforms. I don't know
Great.
what's commonplace in Hawaii,
Hmm.
but
I'll find it.
yeah, if it's Spotify or I don't know, yeah.
Spotify. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're a Pink Floyd fan from back in your days of a college,
Somewhat. Somewhat.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll get the Pink Floyd vibe, or a bit of Led Zeppelin, or
Okay.
a bit of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, all the good stuff. So there's something particularly nice that I like, apart from everything else. I'm going to pick this out. Many of us have been trained that the road to success is paved with struggle. You have to fight for your good. If anything comes easily and naturally, it's too good to be true. So we keep swimming upstream, hoping that things will change because we are sacrificing our joy. But if something you are doing is not working, doing more of it will not work better. You need to try a different approach. And I just felt like, but if something you're doing is not working, doing more of it will not work better. I was like, that's so good.
And that's the whole ego's deal. Like if I just push harder or fight harder or attack more, I'll get what I want. But it's a bottomless black hole. It just never goes anywhere. I guess we could ask ourselves, is what I'm doing working? And if it's not, would I be willing to try something different? That was the beginning of the whole Course in Miracles with Helen and Bill. There must be a better way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly the same expression of intent, really, isn't it? Do you see like do you see anything recurring? You know, if someone a sense of like what people feel like they need to be saved from or something when they come to your coaching or they come to you as a client?
Most of my clients deal with some sense of unworthiness,
Mm,
or another way of saying it, not enoughness.
mm,
Like most of my clients walk out of the sessions with an affirmation, something like, I am enough, or I have enough, or I do enough.
mm,
And somewhere along the line, we started to think that there's something wrong with me. And if I could just fix it, then I'd be okay.
mm,
But all that fixing proceeds from the false premise.
mhm,
So anything you do from I'm not enough will not work because you started from a lie. And so if you can just shift that even a little bit and start to come from sufficiency instead of seeking sufficiency, then everything shifts. It's all about your starting point. Like if you're typing and you put your fingers on the wrong keys to start out with, if you're a typist, so no word that you type will make sense because your original position was erroneous.
mm,
But if you start your fingers on the right keys with the J and the H or whatever it was, then everything you write will work. So we have to retrace our thoughts to the original position from which our thoughts proceed, and then we get a correct thought. It's the difference between wrong mind and right mind.
mm,
When we're in our right mind, everything works. When our wrong mind, nothing works.
mm.
So we have to just ask ourselves, what is my right mind, and how would I be living differently if I proceeded from that?
And how interesting, because that ties in with what you were saying about Dr. Wayne Dyer, you know, when he said that
Yeah.
he had enough, and you were like, whoa, pardon?
Yeah.
Billionaires don't even say that.
Yeah, he's the only guy I ever heard say I have enough money. And my ego jumped and so yeah, you make $25,000 a lecture. Of course you do. But that was the ego. But then I realized that he was actually giving me a profound teaching that you have enough because you define yourself as having enough. You become enough by defining yourself as enough now.
Mm,
And we could do a whole nother lecture on this, but in special relationships, people think I'm a half. I've got some good stuff going on, but I have some flaws and needs and emptiness and brokenness. And let me find another person who's half, and their half will complement my half, and
mm,
together we'll make a whole.
mm,
But relationships are not additive, they're multiplicative. So when you have a half times a half, you get a quarter. You
yeah,
follow that? In
yeah.
other words, two people trying to complete themselves. The line, the movie line that drives me crazy is you complete me.
Mm,
Because if you can complete me, it means I'm incomplete and something outside can make me complete.
mm,
So people enter into relationships feeling I'm lonely and this person will fill me in. But then the relationships only exacerbates your loneliness because you brought the platform of loneliness to the relationship.
wow.
But if you can somehow find your wholeness and bring one whole person to connect with one other whole person, then you become whole. You don't complete yourself by filling yourself in with somebody else. That's why people get divorced. We've all been broken up or divorced in some way. So we have to somehow come from wholeness instead of seeking wholeness. That's the whole game.
Mm.
And we could do a whole nother program on that. We won't go into that, but that's a subject unto itself.
Excellent. It reminds me sometimes, you know, excuse me, if I'm having a cup of coffee, I normally have like a, I don't know if you can see, but you know, say if I've got a cafetiere about that big, and I'll have 2 or 3 cups of coffee before I set off in the morning. And I'll sometimes like look and see that I'm halfway through my coffee, and my ego's already thinking, "Oh, you're halfway through that coffee. Do you not think you should top it up? But then you won't have much left in the cavity." It's like, still got half a cup. What are you on about?
Yeah. Yeah, half empty or half full. Yeah. the ego plays unbelievable games with us, doesn't it? It's just, to be authentic and honest, I had a lot of issues with women because I was constantly looking for a woman who would validate me and make me wonderful and lovable.
Mhm.
And none of those relationships worked because I was looking outside myself for answers.
Mm.
And then when I finally got, I'd rather be with somebody I can enjoy being with instead of who's going to make me happy. And I began to come from a sense of wholeness. And I finally met a person that I could really be with because I wasn't in perpetual need. I came from perpetual wholeness. I have my ups and downs still, of course, but that was it was a theme change, a theme upgrade, we can call that.
Mm. Yeah, I think the special relationship, holy relationship kind of model that the course presents us with is it's absolutely invaluable, really, and it reminds me of something like Marianne Williamson was saying about, if we don't need men, she was talking to women in a meeting, sort of saying, if we don't need men, oh no, I think that's right. She said something about relationships, and then one of the students said to her, "So we don't actually need men then?" And then Marianne Williamson's gone, "Yeah. So doesn't that mean that we can enjoy them more?" Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It's the same principle of like coming to the buffet, coming to Willy Wonka's buffet with his everlasting supply of abundant love.
It's hard to enjoy what you need. It's like you're in a state of need instead of a state of celebration. It's a little bit like waiting. Waiting. Like waiting is a state of mind.
Hmm.
And the more I'm waiting for this, I'm waiting for that, I'm waiting for this. And the more you affirm to yourself, I'm waiting, the more waiting you experience. And it's like waiting is a state of consciousness. It's a room in the mansion.
Hmm.
And the more you wait, the more you wait. But if you can just celebrate what already is fulfillment, then you're not waiting anymore because fulfillment is a room of its own. We're back to the same analogy, aren't we?
Mhm.
So it's like very often I'll be at a restaurant and I'm hungry and they're taking a long time waiting. Where's it coming? Where's it coming? Is it coming now? And I think, well, forget about it. I'll just enjoy the moment. And of course, the food comes at that moment because I shifted from the waiting mode to the acceptance mode, appreciation mode.
But that's a theme that I've heard, excuse me, a lot this evening is your emphasis on that complete spin of like, it's like transmitting, isn't it, rather than expecting to receive or something. Or
No.
maybe that, I don't know if that's the right, because you do receive, but because you do sort of tap into the law of attraction as a teaching device as well, don't you? Whether I've heard you talk about that a lot as a useful way to explain to people the, yeah, I think positioning really, isn't it? Which you've just explained with the waiting. It's like you're transmitting, you're not looking to go, what's being transmitted to me. It's like there's something Einstein said about it. The outside has to match your frequency that you give off because
Yes. He also said that you can never solve a problem with the same mind that created it.
Hmm.
The whole purpose of the problem is to rise to a higher level consciousness. So you see the problem from a greater perspective. And from that perspective, you can see exactly why it's a problem and solve it. But if you're stuck in the problem trying to fix it from the level of the problem, the mind that, and Jesus says this in the Course, that one of the funniest statements he makes, he said that you cannot be your own guide to miracles because it was you who created them, created the need. So, yeah, of course, the guy that created the need for miracles is not the guy that's going to solve it because it was you who made them necessary. That's what he said.
There's so much humor in A Course in Miracles. I have.
Thank God.
It really does make me laugh. So beautiful. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. I think I'm looking, there's probably a couple of things that are not jumping out at me, but my inner sat nav is telling me that our journey is complete. I don't know how you feel.
I think we've covered a lot of territory.
Mm.
And I think, boy, if you didn't get it from anything we said, you might want to try A Course in Miracles. I think we both offered a lot of nuggets. And my teacher used to say, if I said one thing tonight that touched you, touched your heart, and you keep working with that, you're going to come all the way home.
Mm.
That truth is like a diamond with many different facets. And if you follow any one facet in, you get to the center. So I think if, you and I said anything that it touched any of our readers in one place, that one place is the doorway to heaven, if you're willing to follow it, walk through it.
Beautiful. I think I'll add to that that my teacher said there's only three types of people in the world: those who can count and those who can't.
Very cute. Very cute. I love it. Thanks.
Just so we remembered to laugh, just so the Son of God remembered to laugh. What I like to call the huge sane idea.
Huge sane idea. So it is. Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I sure enjoyed connecting with you, Leon. We haven't spoken before, but I feel like we're dear brothers who, from another mother, so to speak, who connected. There's nothing more fulfilling than talking truth and being with somebody on the wavelength of miracles. To me, that's the most fun thing I could do. So thank you so much for inviting me. I totally honor you and your ministry and your podcast. I think you're really transmitting a lot of healing to lots of people. So I feel blessed to be part of that.
Wow, that's received with a wholehearted loveliness. Thank you very much indeed. An absolute pleasure to spend time with you. And yeah, I shall be continuing to love you to the full capacity of my loving ability from the other
Wow.
side of the globe.
Got it. And back at you.
Yeah, excellent.
We're absolutely together in spirit.
Brilliant. I'll see you tomorrow for part two.
Okay. I'll be happy to come back anytime you like.
Thank you very much. I'll send you some music, Helen.
Yes, I'd love to hear your music and see your graphics as well.
Brilliant. Be
And
well.
much love, everybody who's watched the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us and contributing your consciousness by watching this. This is not a one-way transmission, it's a two-way collaboration. So be it.
May the course be with you.
And so it is.